A veteran attorney with 15 years of service at the Department of Justice says he was fired for refusing to lie to a court, and when Senator Chris Van Hollen confronted Attorney General Pam Bondi about it, her answers left America with more questions than clarity. This isn't just about one lawyer or one political spat. It's about whether the nation's top law enforcement agency is silencing truth-tellers and punishing integrity in the very place where honesty should be sacred. If that opening line doesn't stop you in your tracks, consider this. The whistleblower, R.Z. Ravini, earned commendations for his work, but when asked to sign a legal brief he believed had no basis in fact or law, he refused.
Madam Attorney General, yesterday, R.Z. Ravini filed a whistleblower complaint against the Department of Justice. As I think you know, he was a 15-year veteran of the Department of Justice. He received commendations during the first Trump administration for all his work at DOJ, but he filed a detailed account of his recent experience at the Department of Justice, saying that prior to his determination, that he was terminated after he refused to sign an appeal brief that was unsupported by evidence or the law. And he says, "I didn't sign up to lie." In response to his termination, you made a statement on Fox News a little while ago saying, "At my direction, every Department of Justice attorney is required to zealously advocate on behalf of the United States, and that any attorney who fails to abide by this direction will face consequences." So, General Bondi, I guess the direct question is, he says he was fired because he didn't want to make an untruthful statement to a court of law. I have two questions. Number one, I assume you agree that zealous advocacy does not mean telling untruths to courts of law. And second, if that's not the case, what did you mean by saying he was not a zealous advocate?
Senator Van Hollen, this is all pending litigation, as you're well aware, and the timing of it, I can't discuss pending litigation. This is a whistleblower lawsuit pending within my office, but I will say the timing of it I find suspect, as he takes hits at Emil Bovee, who is one of the best human beings I know, one of the smartest, brilliant men I know, who will soon become a federal judge. And his hearing happens to be today, and I find the irony of the timing of it pretty remarkable, the lawsuit. But this had to do with attorney-client privilege information that was disclosed. I can't talk about the substance, but what I will tell you, and you have obviously my word, any zealous advocacy means to be done ethically and honestly, always. And that's what I mean by zealous advocacy. He also accused Emil Bovee of things that Todd Blanche, who is one of the best human beings I also know, my Deputy Attorney General, was in the room and said did not happen. But again, I wish I could get into greater detail. I can't because it's pending. But I stand by Emil Bovee and I stand by Todd Blanche every day, and I always will.
Well, Madam Attorney General, I will say that his account seems to have lots of information. So as you say, this will obviously be something that's litigated or reviewed through due process procedures. But I have to say that it's very, very disturbing. We've also heard from others in other departments who are responsible for implementing the laws of the United States that they feel uncomfortable about having been asked to do things that they thought were unethical. Let me go on to some of the budget questions, and I really want to follow up on my colleagues, Senator Moran and Senator Collins. But the DOJ grant funding is being sort of cut back on two fronts. One, in April, the department terminated hundreds of grant awards, notifying grantees that their current grant funds were gone, effective immediately. That included, law enforcement training grants, technical assistance awards, some dating back to fiscal year, I think, 2017. So, question number one: is, are you going to be releasing those funds? The second concern regarding grants has to do with the monies that were appropriated in this fiscal year, in March. And my understanding is that DOJ is withholding an overwhelming number of notices of funding opportunities, NOFOs, meaning that grantees who rely on these grants, including many who provide services to victims of crimes, are literally, in some cases, running out of money. For example, the department's biggest grant-making component, the Office of Justice Programs, has only posted one notice for fiscal year 25, NOFO notice. So if you could answer the question with respect to both those pieces.
Sure, and that's a very valid question, Senator. The notices will be going out in coming weeks about the grants. And we did cut grants by 6%, and I'm here to tell every senator, if we did cut a grant that you care about that is specific to your state, please contact me. I've turned on grants that were cut off. So please, if that happens, there's an appeal process, but you can pick up the phone and you can call me, and I would be more than happy to look at that. I never want to take away a grant that is actually helping Americans, helping victims, helping law enforcement, and we're looking at it on a case-by-case basis, and many of those are being appealed already, but you have my word, we will look at all of those, absolutely.
Thank you. And in terms of the other piece of the question, when the notices for information will go out, because the fiscal year obviously is, running out, and we are hearing from lots of entities that are waiting for those notices so they can apply for the grant funding.
Yeah, yes, Senator. The notice of funding is consistent with our priorities, and they're finalizing it right now. It will be going out very shortly.
Very shortly. All right. Thank you.
It'll be posted on a rolling basis, too, I believe.
Okay. If you could just keep us posted on that. And I would appreciate it, Madam Attorney General, if you could have your team or respond to a letter that about 30 senators wrote to you on this topic of the prior fiscal year funds that were frozen.
I will make sure they look at that letter. I think we've received probably thousands of letters.
You've gotten lots of letters. But we really do need, in order to do our job, to get responses. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Attorney General.
His words were simple but devastating. I didn't sign up to lie. That decision, he claims, cost him his job. For the first full minute of this hearing, viewers weren't just listening to a political debate. They were witnessing a direct challenge to the credibility of America's justice system. And if his story is true, then every citizen has reason to be worried. Because if truth can be punished in the Justice Department, what happens to the very foundation of the law? Ravini's case is more than just personal grievance. It's a window into how justice may be compromised from the inside. Here you have a man who dedicated more than a decade of his life to the department, who served under multiple administrations, who was respected enough to be awarded commendations. Yet the moment he refused to bend the truth for political expediency, he was out. When Senator Van Hollen pressed Bondi on this point, he framed the question clearly. Does zealous advocacy mean telling untruths to the courts? Bondi had no straightforward answer. Instead, she leaned on the shield of pending litigation and accused the whistleblower of choosing his timing to damage her ally, Amal Bowie, during a judicial confirmation process. To her, the coincidence of his complaint with Bowie's nomination hearing was suspicious. To many watching, her evasiveness was far more concerning than the timing of the complaint. Bondi didn't just deflect, she doubled down. She insisted she stands by Amal Bowie and Todd Blanche, both of whom she called brilliant and ethical men. She said she could not discuss the details, but implied that Ravini's accusations were untrue. Yet what stuck with people wasn't her loyalty to her associates. It was her unwillingness to address the central issue. Why would a veteran attorney invent such a claim at great personal cost? Van Hollen pointed out that Ravini's complaint was detailed and specific. And even more troubling, other officials in government have raised similar concerns about being pressured into actions they believed were unethical. This wasn't one isolated voice crying foul. It was part of a chorus beginning to form inside the walls of justice. The bigger problem here is the culture that appears to be developing inside the department. If attorneys fear losing their careers for upholding their oath to tell the truth, then the line between law and politics begins to blur in dangerous ways. Zealous advocacy has always meant fighting hard for your client, but it never meant manufacturing arguments unsupported by fact or law. When that definition is twisted, justice becomes something else entirely. The moment integrity is treated as disloyalty, the department stops being a guardian of the law and starts being a political weapon. And if that is what's happening here, then the ripple effects extend far beyond one whistleblower's firing. They reach every case, every ruling, every citizen who depends on an impartial system. But the whistleblower controversy wasn't the only bombshell that dropped in this hearing. Senator Van Hollen pivoted to another issue, one that affects Americans in towns and cities across the country: the abrupt termination of critical Justice Department grants. In April, the DOJ suddenly cut off hundreds of awards, funding that supported law enforcement training, services for crime victims, and technical assistance. Some of these grants have been active since 2017. The effect was immediate and painful. Local police departments lost resources. Nonprofits serving victims of violent crime saw funding vanish overnight. Programs designed to strengthen community safety were left scrambling, with some organizations warning they could shut down within months. For victims already struggling to find support, the rug was pulled out from under them. Van Hollen didn't mince words. He demanded to know why these grants had been terminated without warning and why notices of new funding opportunities were being delayed. Bondi admitted to a 6% cut across the board, but insisted there was an appeals process and even encouraged senators to call her directly if they wanted a grant in their state restored. Think about that for a second. The nation's top law enforcement official was effectively telling senators to pick up the phone and lobby her to save grants in their states, as though justice funding were a favor rather than a responsibility. That answer was cold comfort to the victims and law enforcement agencies already facing gaps in support. Bondi promised that notices for new grants would be posted soon, but she couldn't explain why so many had been withheld for months. She insisted her department was finalizing priorities and would release opportunities on a rolling basis. But the senators in that room, and the people watching outside, weren't reassured. For them, the question wasn't just when the money would go out. It was why it had been stopped in the first place. Why choke off resources to programs that protect communities at a time when public safety concerns are rising? Why leave victims and local agencies hanging, waiting for relief, while Washington delays? Taken together, the whistleblower scandal and the grant cuts paint a grim picture of the Justice Department under Bondi's leadership. On one hand, you have career attorneys punished for refusing to cross ethical lines. On the other, you have essential programs strangled by sudden funding cuts and bureaucratic delays. Both point to a department more concerned with loyalty and optics than with truth and service. Both raise the question of whether the DOJ is fulfilling its mission to protect justice or undermining it. And let's be clear, this isn't about partisan games. This is about the basic question of whether Americans can trust their own justice system. If whistleblowers are punished for refusing to lie, then honesty itself becomes a liability. If crime victim services and community safety programs are gutted, then the very people the DOJ claims to serve are left unprotected. In both cases, the losers are ordinary Americans who expect their government to stand for fairness, truth, and accountability. The heart of this story is bigger than a single senator's confrontation or a single attorney general's defense. It's about whether justice in America is still blind or whether it's being blinded. It's about whether integrity is still valued or whether it's seen as an obstacle. It's about whether power is accountable or untouchable. And that's why this hearing matters so much. Because when the integrity of the Justice Department collapses, the consequences reach every courtroom, every victim, every citizen. Senator Van Hollen was right to call it disturbing. Because it is. It's disturbing that a decorated attorney could lose his job simply for refusing to mislead a court. It's disturbing that the head of the DOJ can dodge accountability with vague references to pending litigation while never answering the core question. It's disturbing that funds meant for crime victims and community safety can be cut without explanation. And it's disturbing that the department expects Americans to accept all of this without protest. But the truth is, people are watching. They see the evasions. They see the cuts. They see the culture of fear growing among those who should be free to uphold the law. And they're not buying the excuses. The story of RZ Ravini is not just his story. It's the story of anyone who dares to put truth above politics in an environment that seems to punish it. It's the story of whistleblowers everywhere who risk their careers to protect the public's trust. It's the story of whether America will stand by its principles or compromise them in the shadows. That's why this moment matters, and why we can't look away. Because at the end of the day, the real question isn't just about one attorney general or one senator. It's about us. It's about whether we will demand integrity from our institutions or allow them to slide further into corruption. It's about whether we will defend those who refuse to lie or let them be destroyed in silence. It's about whether justice in America still means something or whether it's becoming just another political slogan. So I'll leave you with this. Should refusing to lie in court ever cost someone their career? Should protecting truth be punished in the very halls of justice? If your answer is no, then this story isn't just news, it's a call to action. Because without accountability, without transparency, and without courage from people willing to speak up, the system fails. And when the system fails, it fails us all. If you believe whistleblowers deserve protection and that justice should never be bent to politics, share this video. Leave a comment with your thoughts. Do you think the DOJ is punishing truth tellers or protecting the law? And don't forget to subscribe for more breakdowns like this. We go deeper than the headlines to uncover what really matters in Washington, and together, we can keep holding power accountable. The fight for truth isn't just theirs, it's ours.